The reason why I exist as the human being I am today is truly because of the people that have surrounded me throughout my life. Like links to a chain, there have been integral people who have entered my life, who through linking their lives to mine, created possibility and hope. They closed the gaps that were present, and they strengthened weak areas and have linked me to a better future. The future I am living today, that future has led me to sharing my story with you. My story really begins with the first family that linked their lives to mine. It must have been around the end of 1989 or early 1990, when I was just 8 months old, that I could say the first link to the chain of my progression was first formed. My father and mother, both Zulu, were forced to flee their rural home, where the frightening political violence in Natal had erupted due to the African-on-African conflict between the ANC and the IFP, which was instigated by the apartheid government at the time. And with nothing but the clothes on their backs and an 8-month-old me, my parents managed to escape the devastation and ended up at the doorstep of a white family, the Richards family, who lived in the suburbs of Lelusha. They did not only open their doors to us, but they changed the trajectory of mine and later my little sister's lives for years to come. They didn't simply just give my family a few coins in the hopes of closing the door to continue with their suburban lifestyle once more. No, instead, they opened their doors knowing that what had happened to me and my family was ultimately connected and impacted theirs. They understood the concept of Ubuntu, that we're all part of a chain, and that their existence was linked to mine and vice versa. And so instead of seeing this as a disturbance, they saw this as an opportunity to use their privilege as a tool towards realizing justice and bringing about equality to this country. And they also knew, or perhaps they came to learn, that this wasn't an overnight thing. There was no quick fix to solve the brokenness, the pain, the trauma and division that not only our family had faced, but in fact, the entire nation too. And they were perhaps overwhelmed, but not paralyzed by the enormity of the problems that us and our country faced. And instead, they decided to do what they could with what they had, where they were. And they decided to play the long game. They knew that change was a long road journey, and they also knew that they couldn't really make a difference from a distance or behind high walls. No, they knew they would have to get involved, that they would get knee-deep in the mess and chaos, and that they would make mistakes, and that it wouldn't be smooth sailing. But they knew that progress for our country outweighed the inconvenience. They knew that change needed to happen with and not to. That change wasn't a them thing, but that it needed to happen together. And this family not only gave my family a place to stay, but they linked arms. They helped my mom raise my sister and I. And after my father, who was consumed by the unresolved anger he faced, ended up being arrested, they invited us into their family. And 32 years later, our Mqunu, Richards, and now Chittenden family remain united, continuing to walk side by side. And since then, many more people have come into my life, adding more links to this progression of my life. And in the workplace, for example, where my bosses invested in me from doing normal corporate stuff like affording various learning opportunities and training, to personal development, like helping me get my glasses or my driver's license. But most importantly, taking a chance on me when I wasn't the most qualified for the job. And all of these are small but significant instances in my life where people took the time and took the risk to guarantee my development. Not because they owed it to me, but because they thought about the potential of what might be. They thought about what can become. And it's these people and their approaches that have shaped my today. Their long-term commitment to my success has shaped my heart and my commitment to do the same for others. And I share this story to highlight my point for this talk, that gaining the edge must be done together. Because there really is no edge without inclusion. There is no edge without equality. There is no edge without access. And it's because what I have seen in my own life that I have invested in people the same way. And it's this lens that is formed for change making that has proved to me that this concept of slow and inclusive growth should be emphasized in all spheres of society. And I now spend most of my time thinking about this in my work for a social enterprise where we help drive purpose-driven business, but also in my work as a community builder, where I and many others in the neighborhood called Makers Valley are building a well-being economy. It's a local economy where people and planet are as important as profit. But how do we enable a community to advance, uplift, and develop without the ugly side of gentrification rearing its head? So that the very people who seek upliftment and change do not become victims of their own advancement and end up being displaced. It's a question we keep at the forefront of our minds because you see, with anything that seeks to improve and bring positive impact, there can also be a consequent negative result. And so it's a question that we must keep asking ourselves when we partner with stakeholders, when we develop new programs or projects, or when we're seeking funding. And we have come to find that the answers often lie with our community itself. We can minimize the negative repercussions when we ensure that all voices in the community are heard and that they have equal power. And it's when we ensure that the commercially minded investors see the commercial value of community building and long-term investment. It's when we ensure transparent and inclusive community engagement are part of the policies and development strategies. It's when we see public-private partnerships, all parties working hand in hand, that we see win-win-win outcomes. And so with that being said, I would like to pose the question, how do we gain the edge without the edge harming others? When we engage in the topic of advancing as a society through technology, we need to ensure that no one is left behind. We need to ensure that the direction we're going in has been co-created and not just chosen by a few. We need to make sure that we look at the far-off impacts and not just the short-term gains. Leaving no one behind makes sure that there is an inclusive approach on the way forward. It means slowing down to ensure that there is equality in the design of the technology and apps of tomorrow. And we cannot pretend that technology will solve all our problems when the people who are facing the problems are not included in its evolution. Inequality, for example, has often been showcased on the front of magazines or newspapers with juxtaposed images of visible wealth and poverty. And we see this with housing, education, employment, gender. And now more than ever, we are feeling the impact of a digital divide. The digital divide is not as simple as having access or not having access to the internet or the equipment that is required to do that. Gaining the edge together means looking at all aspects of access, looking at language, education levels, levels of income. It means looking at location and levels of bandwidth and many other factors. And so when we speak about ensuring access for all, so that all can progress, it's vital that we bring all to the table. How do we do that though? How do we open up the chain links to allow for more to enter? Well, as the example of the Richards family in my life, this is not a quick fix or a one-stop workshop solution. We shouldn't assume that the gap will be bridged if we don't think about every aspect of our world, the way we use technology on a daily basis without thinking about those living in our midst who do not have the same opportunity. The same opportunity perhaps to watch this as you are right now. And this intentional outlook, our outward focused thinking, should be the new way of being, a new way of approaching development as we seek to rebuild our country and our world. Embracing our interconnectedness, ensuring that our digital connection enhances our human connection. That's what strengthens our society. And gaining the edge cannot be achieved in silos, where being first to market is idolized. We have all too often seen the flaws of tech when the ramifications of apps and systems that may have well been initially created with good intention have become dangerous or not well thought through, and their obsession with profit margins have overtaken their initial purpose. We have to be intentional about leaving no one behind. And in the last year, I have seen on a day-to-day basis the desolation and the loss of those who are. When the world was pivoting to online and digital platforms, my community was stuck in a world that could not continue with business. They did not have access to market. They could not do school on Zoom. And so the inequality gap continued to widen as the lack of access to technology resulted in a further lack of access to employment, income, and education. And however, while the world tried to continue with their new normal, we knew that we had come face to face with the realities of poverty that our community had endured. And food insecurity became a critical issue to be addressed, that through what is being called a network of possibility, a range of diverse stakeholders, community members, business owners have come together to provide food to those in need. And instead of a top-down or bottom-up approach, this hardship faced by all united all parties and leveled the power dynamics that created an opportunity that allowed for everyone's input and ideas to be equally valued. And it was through this beautiful collaboration that most solutions were birthed. One of them I'd like to share with you today being the Community Recycling Swap Shop. A young, dynamic, creative waste management business linked up with us, the community-based organization, to create a partnership that would be beneficial to all parties involved. They needed more recyclable items for their business model to work, and at the same time, we were brainstorming ways to create a more dignified and fair system for those in need to access the limited food donated to us by NGOs. And what resulted was a model that encourages the community to recycle, and for every bag of recyclables dropped off at the depot, they are rewarded with 1 point, or what we now call MVPs, a co-created point system or a community currency that in exchange can be used to redeem or access donated surplus food and hygiene products. And this has created shared value for all entities involved, and it's created a more dignified experience that allows active participation and a collective and shared responsibility for our community. And this model has been amazingly successful, but it was not an overnight success. It required time and investment into education. It took many meetings and workshops to iron out many of the initial flaws. It was through many iterations, kicking off with a simple Google Sheets system and 2 tablets, and has now progressed slowly using the many insights of our community members. And in the first few months, we saw the issues were such as lack of access to internet, low digital literacy levels, and entry-level smartphones that had so little space for storage for apps. And these vital learnings has led us to the system we use now, a low-tech platform that has worked due to the fact that it meets our community where it's at. And it's through this approach that we have learned that solutions will only work when the people who are affected by the problems we aim to solve are at the heart of the design. What this community swap shop has taught me is to embrace the slow, to take time and investing into the process of building with one another, because it's not only about the outcome or the end product, but it's about how we got there. And the links that have been built, that have been bonding and strengthening our community along the way. It's through an all-in approach that we can start to see a community, a city, and even a country truly progress. And we can all take on this approach wherever we are, in whatever position we have. And in every meeting we engage in, we have the chance to ensure that our tomorrow is inclusive, to shape a tomorrow that is for all. And all it takes is asking the question, how can we gain the edge together?